Good morning, everyone. Today I am planting one of the most popular early cool season greens in my Ohio garden, delicious, nutritious spinach. Now, spinach is a pretty easy crop to grow with a few caveats. And in today's video, I'm going to share some tips and tricks for how to successfully grow your own spinach. Now, one thing I like to note in all of my videos is that I am growing in Ohio. So some of my advice is going to be more specific to Ohio and similar growing regions. But some of these tips are going to apply universally to growing spinach. So let's jump in. Now, one of the most common problems I see folks having with spinach is that they are waiting too late into the spring season to plant. With spinach, timing is everything. Spinach can be direct sown as soon as the soil has warmed to 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the spring, or about 8 to 10 weeks before your last spring frost date, depending on your growing location. Here in my Ohio garden, I typically won't sow spinach any later than the end of March, and I try to get my first planting out the first week of March. During years where we're having a very mild winter, like this one has been, I will plant spinach sometimes in mid to late February. Now, a couple of options for getting an early jump start on spinach include using a cold frame. Spinach is an excellent candidate for sowing even earlier in a cold frame or under a similar type cover. Spinach can also be started indoors. I've read that spinach can be difficult to transplant, but I've not found this to be the case. The one problem you might run into is that it can actually be too warm in the house under grow lights, which can reduce germination rates. So if you're starting indoors, try to keep the growing area cool and definitely do not use a heat mat. Another option is actually to sow seed in the fall and overwinter. Here in Ohio, I've had good luck sowing seed in late September into early October. It gives the spinach just enough time to get established, and then it will go into a semi-dormant state during the winter months. This then allows those spinach seedlings to jump right into growth in the late winter, early spring, giving an earlier harvest. Now, these plants are typically my earliest to bolt in the spring, but I usually get 1 to 2 good harvests off of them. Now, the reason that timing is so important with spinach is twofold. The first is all about temperature. Spinach loves and needs cool temperatures. As I've mentioned, the seed itself will not germinate in soil which is too warm. Optimal soil temperature for germination is 45 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, but spinach seed can germinate at soil temperatures as low as 35. Spinach germination will drop off drastically in warmer soils, those that are above 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Spinach seedlings will tolerate temperature dips as low as 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit, but optimal temperatures for growing spinach hover right around 50 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures consistently above 70 to 80 will cause spinach to become bitter and bolt. This is why it's critical, especially for us in the Midwest, to get spinach in early enough to avoid the warmer temperatures that are typically here by the end of May. When I'm growing spinach, I'm going to have much better results erring on the side of planting too early versus too late. The second issue is day length. Spinach is day length sensitive and will typically begin to bolt after day length reaches over 12 hours. And this is regardless of temperature. Timing is key for a fall harvest as well. For a fall spinach harvest here in Ohio, I want to be sowing spinach seed in late August into early September as the days begin to shorten in length. Since it's critical that spinach keeps its cool, what can we do to help? Spinach can very much benefit from the use of shade cloth, both in slightly extending the harvest season in late spring and getting plants established in the late summer for a fall harvest. As temperatures begin to climb over 70, spinach can tend to get bitter and tough. Shading the plants later in the season can help. Shading the planting area in the fall can also help reduce soil temperatures, thereby improving germination rates. If you don't want to use shade cloth or don't have any on hand, strategically planting warm season crops to provide shade can help as well. This is especially beneficial if you plant those crops so that they're blocking that late afternoon sun, which is the most intense. Mulching the soil around your spinach plants can help keep soil temperatures cool as well as hold moisture in. And since spinach seed doesn't love to germinate in warmer soils, seed can be pre-germinated when planting in the summer for a fall harvest. Now with spinach, like all of our garden vegetables, Variety selection can make a big difference in our success. There are spinach varieties which have been bred to be well suited specifically to one season or another. So there are some that will do well in the spring, some that will do well in the fall, some that do better over the winter, and there are some that are well suited to all of those planting seasons. I'll pop a few examples of various spinach varieties for different seasons up here on the screen for you. And the ones with asterisks are varieties I've grown and have had great results with. Another consideration is that downy mildew, a pathogen which favors cool, humid conditions, can be a problem in some growing areas, and is often more of a problem with overwintered spinach. Selecting a variety with resistance to downy mildew races is the best option if this is a problem for you. Cornell University has a handy list of varieties which have downy mildew resistance, as well as other disease resistances, and I'll link that in the video description below. There are also many varieties now that have great bolt resistance, and in general, for growing in Ohio, I always opt for varieties that are marketed as having bolt resistance. This is of particular importance for planting in that spring season going into longer and warmer days. There is also the consideration of what type of leaf you prefer, Savoy, semi-Savoy, flat, or smooth leaf, which mainly comes down to personal preference, though I do find that the Savoy types tend to keep better in storage. And one more thing to note, greens such as Malabar spinach, New Zealand spinach, and Chinese or African spinach are not true spinach, but can make good warm season spinach substitutes. I often see spinach listed as a heavy feeder, heavy feeders being those plants which have higher nutrient requirements. However, from my own experience, I find it to be more of a moderate medium feeder. You'll get sick of hearing me say this, but a one-size-fits-all fertilizer approach isn't nearly as effective as getting soil tested, fixing nutrient imbalances, and ensuring that your soil is healthy overall. Once that soil is healthy, you'll find that the need for exogenous inputs like fertilizer drop off drastically or completely go away. But if your soil is very depleted, a balanced fertilizer can work for spinach. My recommendation, however, would be to opt for either a natural granular fertilizer, I like to use Gardens Alive's vegetable food, or a fish emulsion-based liquid fertilizer like Neptune's Harvest, either as a side dress or a root drench once the seedlings are a couple of inches tall or at transplant time. After that initial feeding, just keep an eye on your plants. If they look healthy with a dark, rich green color, there is no need to add additional fertilizer. But if they look pale or slightly yellowish, they may benefit from an additional application or two of something with a bit higher nitrogen ratio. Application frequency will depend on what type of fertilizer you're using. What I often end up doing is just working compost or composted manure into the planting area before planting. Typically, this is sufficient and I don't need to add anything else. Now, just a few more tips for spinach success that I want to mention. And the first is don't overcrowd your plants. A lack of air circulation can cause fungal problems in spinach and can spur plants to bolt prematurely. For spinach, you'll want to be sure to use fresh seed. Germination of spinach seed drops off notably after about 2 years. If you're unsure if your spinach seed is still good, do a quick at-home germination test or sow extra thick and thin seedlings as needed. Be aware that spinach is sensitive to soil pH. It's happiest at about the 6.5 to 7 or 7.5 pH range. It grows poorly at a more acidic level of below 6. And spinach is shallow-rooted and does not tolerate water stress well. For best production and eating quality, maintain consistent moisture. And like I mentioned before, mulching your plants can really help with this. Now, spinach pest pressure is going to vary depending on where you are growing, but some of the most common spinach pests include leaf miners, slugs and snails, aphids, and then, of course, in the spring, rabbits. For leaf miners, a simple solution is to cover plants with insect netting, either at transplant time or as soon as seedlings emerge. For slugs and snails, you can use slug bait, beer traps, or what I do, which is to dust plants and surrounding soil with diatomaceous earth. Though I will say that slugs don't often bother my spinach and seem to prefer other early season greens like Chinese cabbage and lettuce instead. For aphids, a strong blast of water from a garden hose can dislodge the pest, but for a particularly tenacious infestation, an insecticidal soap can do the trick. Also, you'll want to encourage the presence of aphids' natural predators, such as lady beetles, in your garden. For rabbits, my go-to solution is just a fence in the garden. I use a barrier of chicken wire along the base of my fence that they can't squeeze through. Another option would be to do insect netting over wire hoops that is fastened to the ground securely so they can't get underneath it. Repellents such as plant skid can work too. I just have better luck with a physical barrier. So if you've struggled to grow spinach in the past, I hope that you'll give it another shot. And if you have any additional tips you can share for how to get a beautiful, bountiful spinach harvest, drop a line in the comments below and let me know. And if you found today's video helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.